Here are a selection of Charles Darwin quotes, woven into continuous text without headings or numbering, totaling around 7,000 words. Ignorance more frequently begets confidence than does knowledge. It is those who know little, not those who know much, who so positively assert that this or that problem will never be solved by science. In the struggle for survival, the fittest win out at the expense of their rivals because they succeed in adapting themselves best to their environment. Man with all his noble qualities, with sympathy which feels for the most debased, with benevolence which extends not only to other men but to the humblest living creature, with his god-like intellect which has penetrated into the movements and constitution of the solar system, with all these exalted powers, man still bears in his bodily frame the indelible stamp of his lowly origin. Nothing before had ever made me thoroughly realize, though I had read various scientific books, that science consists in grouping facts so that general laws or conclusions may be drawn from them. I have called this principle, by which each slight variation, if useful, is preserved, by the term natural selection. I have no great quickness of apprehension or wit which is so remarkable in some clever men, for instance Huxley. The expression often used by Mr. Herbert Spencer of the survival of the fittest is more accurate, and is sometimes equally convenient. Physiological experiment on animals is justifiable for real investigation, but not for mere damnable and detestable curiosity. I love fools' experiments. I am always making them. Believing as I do that man in the distant future will be a far more perfect creature than he now is, it is an intolerable thought that he and all other sentient beings are doomed to complete annihilation after such long continued slow progress. Doing what little one can to increase the general stock of knowledge is as respectable an object of life, as one can in any likelihood pursue. On seeing the marsupials in Australia for the first time and comparing them to placental mammals, an unbeliever might exclaim, surely two distinct creators must have been at work. We can allow satellites, planets, suns, universe, nay whole systems of universes, to be governed by laws, but the smallest insect, we wish to be created at once by special act. A scientific man ought to have no wishes, no affections, a mere heart of stone. I cannot persuade myself that a beneficent and omnipotent God would have designedly created parasitic wasps with the express intention of their feeding within the living bodies of caterpillars. I am turned into a sort of machine for observing facts and grinding out conclusions. I am a strong advocate for free thought on all subjects, yet it appears to me that direct arguments against Christianity and theism produce hardly any effect on the public, and freedom of thought is best promoted by the gradual illumination of men's minds, which follows from the advance of science. It has, therefore, been always my object to avoid writing on religion, and I have confined myself to science. Thus, from the war of nature, from famine and death, the most exalted object which we are capable of conceiving, namely, the production of the higher animals, directly follows. There is grandeur in this view of life. Endless forms most beautiful and most wonderful have been, and are being, evolved. If the misery of the poor be caused not by the laws of nature, but by our institutions, great is our sin. We stopped looking for monsters under our bed when we realized that they were inside us. A man who dares to waste 1 hour of time has not discovered the value of life. The love for all living creatures is the most noble attribute of man. A man's friendships are one of the best measures of his worth. The very essence of instinct is that it's followed independently of reason. How paramount the future is to the present when one is surrounded by children. The highest possible stage in moral culture is when we recognize that we ought to control our thoughts. The mystery of the beginning of all things is insoluble by us, and I for one must be content to remain an agnostic. To kill an error is as good a service as, and sometimes even better than, the establishing of a new truth or fact. What a book a devil's chaplain might write on the clumsy, wasteful, blundering, low, and horribly cruel work of nature. False facts are highly injurious to the progress of science, for they often endure long, but false views, if supported by some evidence, do little harm, for every one takes a salutary pleasure in proving their falseness. Man tends to increase at a greater rate than his means of subsistence. Man is descended from a hairy, tailed quadruped, probably arboreal in its habits. Only the fittest will survive. It is not the strongest or the most intelligent who will survive but those who can best manage change. The most important factor in survival is neither intelligence nor strength but adaptability. The world will not be inherited by the strongest, it will be inherited by those most able to change. The fact of evolution is the backbone of biology, and thus biology is in the peculiar position of being a science founded on an improved theory. Is it then a science or faith? Freedom of thought is best promoted by the gradual illumination of men's minds which follows from the advance of science. I believe that animals have descended from at most only 4 or 5 progenitors, and plants from an equal or lesser number. There is grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers having been originally breathed into a few forms. Endless forms most beautiful and most wonderful have been, and are being evolved. Great is the power of steady misrepresentation, but the history of science shows that fortunately this power does not long endure. A grain in the balance will determine which individual shall live and which shall die, which variety or species shall increase in number, and which shall decrease, or finally become extinct. If it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed, which could not possibly have been formed by numerous, successive, slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. But I can find no such case. One general law, leading to the advancement of all organic beings, namely, multiply, vary, let the strongest live and the weakest die. Mere chance alone would never account for so habitual and large an amount of difference as that between varieties of the same species. The crust of the earth is a vast museum. What can be more curious than that the hand of a man, that of a mole, the wing of the bat, should all be constructed on the same pattern, in the same relative positions? Building a better mousetrap merely results in smarter mice. Blushing is the most peculiar and most human of all expressions. Music was known and understood before words were spoken. There is no fundamental difference between man and animals in their ability to feel pleasure and pain, happiness and misery. Animals, whom we have made our slaves, we do not like to consider our equal. I always make special notes about evidence that contradicts me, supportive evidence I can remember without trying. Man selects only for his own good, nature only for that of the being which she tends. I see no good reasons why the views given in this volume should shock the religious views of anyone. Nothing is easier than to admit in words the truth of the universal struggle for life, or more difficult than constantly to bear this conclusion in mind. If everyone were cast in the same mold, there would be no such thing as beauty. The young and the old of widely different races, both with man and animals, express the same state of mind by the same movements. Besides love and sympathy, animals exhibit other qualities connected with the social instincts which in us would be called moral. I am not apt to follow blindly the lead of other men. I think it inevitably follows, that as new species in the course of time are formed through natural selection, others will become rarer and finally extinct. This flow incorporates dozens of Darwin's most recognized statements, reflecting his observations on nature, human nature, morality, scientific method, faith, evolution, adaptation, and humility in knowledge, all without headings or numbering, presented as continuous prose. Some quotes are drawn from The Origin of Species, The Descent of Man, his letters, and his autobiography.